How do? It's Terry Bush here. I've just come inside for a hot drink. I've been outside in garden all day, burning rubbish. You got to do your bit, ain't you, for the ecosystem, for the environment. So I've been burning rubbish and tyres in my back garden because you can't just bury it in all in ground anymore, can you? It's not like the 15th century or something, or present-day Eastern Europe, parts of Lancashire. Just bury it all in the ground, so I burn it. You can burn anything, it's good for the environment, saves it being buried, doesn't it? You can burn like rubber, plastic, soft metals, So I'm sitting in my deck chair in the back garden watching all this rubbish and the tyre burn, and black bag splits open. It were a beautiful sight, it were. This black bag splits open and an empty packet of pear drops caught the fire, all withered up. Started crimping up in fire, and I say it were majestic, but it reminded me of my Auntie Winnie. You might have known her as Winnie the Widow. Winnie the Widow, she were, on account of her dead husband. And her dead husband were my Uncle Gerald, the confectioner. He had a sweet shop in Filey, but his name were Gerald Peter Sutcliffe, but no relation. Well, he were a relation to me, he were my uncle, but he were no relation to the artist formerly known as the Yorkshire Ripper. I saw Uncle Gerald were a confectioner. If you don't know what that is, he were a sweet shop proprietor. He were a purveyor of sweets. He had all sorts in there. He had like cola cubes, barley twists, custard pips, pixie sticks, lifesavers, Turkish taffy, licorice all sorts, licorice comforts, licorice torpedoes, just raw licorice, all sorts. The only thing he wouldn't sell chocolate, he wouldn't sell brittle, he wouldn't sell nugget. He just considered them baked goods. Didn't want them in the building, didn't want them within earshot of him. Didn't sell moist cakes, none of that. Didn't want them within earshot. But he were a confectioner, and he'd made his money before that as he were in Merchant Navy. Now, we knew he were in Merchant Navy, but we didn't know this part of his past. He had syphilis. They only found this out years later when they cracked open his brain for science, but he had the syphilis, and he caught it off a Filipino longshoreman in Ceylon or Siam or something. One of them mucky countries anyway. And the syphilis, drives you wacky over a period of time. I mean, it's like it causes a blue moss to grow on your brain and on the inside of your brain case. It's either a blue moss, it's something like that, a blue moss or ants or worms or something, but drives you madder than a jungle snake, and it drove him there. I mean, it happened progressively, so at first it was just, for my Uncle Gerald, it was just paranoia and delusion, and it just manifested itself in loads of ways. I mean, his paranoia, they had to move shops all the time. He'd have a thriving business, a thriving shop, because we're a sweet shop, you're going to do well, ain't you? There's all the young kids what come in, and then there's all the hefty housewives, dinner ladies, them women that look like their faces, their cheeks are starting to meet and their foreheads are starting to meet that because they've got so hefty. Look like they've been stung by something. But he'd have thriving businesses, He had one in Filey, obviously, where we're from, Runswick Bay, Flamborough, Rotherham, even as far away as Clitheroe, But he'd just have to up sticks, up sweets and move in the middle of the night. He'd wake me auntie, he'd go into my Auntie Winnie's room and wake her up. Separate rooms by then, obviously. He'd wake her up and say his enemies had finally found him, they'd caught up with him and they'd got to go right now. Apparently his enemy was someone called the Sultan, and he were after him. They were like mortal enemies, that were his nemesis, and he was hell-bent on destroying him, not just his business, him as well, mortally. And so they'd just have to move in the middle of the night, because he'd convinced me Auntie Winnie that this Sultan had been in the middle of the night, and he'd been filling his lungs with ball bearings, but it was just the this were the big syphilis. He had crazy symptoms. I mean, not just the ball bearings. He wouldn't let me Auntie Winnie use starch when she did washing, because he was petrified that the laundry had shatter. What else? Convinced himself that his shins were made of timber. He could always hear whistling, you know. He saved all his toenails. Said his teeth had all shrunk to the size of a baby's in a man's head. But also believed that he could control the seas. Now that last one, that did him in eventually, because their final shop in Bridlington, lovely place it were on the promenade. This shop in Bridlington. By this point, he'd gone round the twist. He was nuttier than a fruit loaf at this point, and he weren't leaving the shop at all. He weren't even dressing himself anymore. He weren't eating right. I mean, he was just dressed in like some cloth wrapped around his body. Could have been a bed sheet, might have been curtains, I don't know. The locals didn't notice. They thought it were a toga and it was like a theme shop, like some Roman thing, but it weren't. It was just the blue moths in his brain doing this to him. So he wouldn't leave the shop anymore, just in case the Sultan caught him unawares. So my auntie Winnie's, you know, visiting him, bringing him like clean underpants and non-starched underpants, and she was bringing him sandwiches. But apparently they found out later he weren't eating the sandwiches. He was licking the butter off them, and then he was throwing the luncheon meat and the bread to the starlings in the back garden. But so he'd finally lost it at this point, and this belief that he could control the seas, an idea that King Neptune had got in touch with him, telepathically seized him, and were commanding him. So on the final hours of his final day, he stripped naked, left the shop, walked down the promenade onto the beach, and then just walked into the sea, and never saw it seen again. Never found a body, and he was never seen again. He turned into somewhat of a local legend, actually. I think he was called the Bridlington Seaman. But never found the body. But that was because of the crabs, I should think, or the lobsters, you know. But he was potty him, nuttier than a fruit loaf, poor bloke.